Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Growth and Gratitude podcast. This is episode 20, and I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest today, my friend, Dr. Erin Baker. Erin, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I am so happy to have you, and we're going to have a really important conversation. On this podcast, we always start with gratitude, and so I will ask Erin, before I even introduce them, to talk about three things, or just share briefly three things that you are grateful for, Erin.
This is such an easy question. I am very grateful right now for community, for sunshine, and may or may not come up later, but financial reserves to take care of my doggie who's going through a lot.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I and our listeners, I'm sure, are going to be sending lots of good energy and healing energy for Harper, for sweet Harper, who I've been blessed to meet. So thank you for your gratitude. And I think that shows that we can still find things to be grateful for, even in moments that are difficult. And we want to be as real as we can here. So we are going to have a fascinating, I think, conversation. We're going to talk about internal family systems, which you introduced me to, Erin, and I'm so grateful for. But before we get to that, let me introduce Erin to all of you, because they are incredibly impressive and have so many things you need to know about. And personally, I'm really excited to say that we're at the beginning of a dear friendship, which I think is really, it's just a beautiful thing. And I'm so glad to have met you through the community that we're part of. And I'm so glad that we've had some chances to sit and chat for a long time in a really open heart space. And it's rare that you find that when immediately, even if you don't know all the ins and outs of somebody's life, that you just feel connected and you feel so comfortable being your true self. So thank you for that, Erin. I'm grateful for that.
Totally great. I'm grateful for that too. I just moved out here to LA a couple months ago, and already I just told the leader of our community that I feel home.
Yeah. That's how those folks are. And we hope that you have, we're not part of a cult that we're trying to pull you into, if it sounds that way. We hope that you all find your own community, whatever it be based on, and wherever you may be geographically, just people who you can be yourself with and you can speak your truth with, and who are going to support you and love you in whatever stage of life you might be in and whatever you might be going through and experiencing. So let me tell you about Dr. Erin Baker, everybody, because they are a self-leadership coach, which we'll learn more about, business strategist, social psychologist, internal family systems practitioner, and official curator of Joy. I love that. They hold a Ph.D. in psychology from University of Texas, Austin, and were formerly in leadership roles at Facebook and Microsoft. So quite a wide range of experiences in your background. Dr. Erin is known for their infectious energy, unapologetic authenticity, incisive wit. And this is from your book, and I love it. I think it's so true. An unflinching commitment to helping their clients create joyful AF businesses and lives that light them up. So I want to take that opportunity to show you Erin's book, Dr. Baker's book, Joyful, with the dash in the middle, AF, which I am reading and loving. And it's the essential business strategy we're afraid to put first. And because of you, thanks to you, I'm no longer afraid to put it first. It absolutely needs to come first. If we are not joyful in what we're doing, and that doesn't mean happy all the time. Of course, it means living the full human experience, but in this joyful manner with attention to how much joy does matter. I'm just so grateful to be learning that from you. So that's Dr. Erin's book. And Dr. Erin is also the host of two fantastic podcasts that I encourage you to check out. I love the episodes. One is called Shift Starters, and the other is called Life in the And, which we talk about a lot here. And it's all and, both and, multiplicity. There's not one way of looking at things. It's never either or. So I just love that whole concept. And fun fact about Erin, of course, Erin has two sweet fur babies, Harper, who we've heard about, who's struggling and we send lots of loving energy to, and also a very friendly cat who I've gotten to meet named Lou Bear. And another thing about Erin is they are almost always wearing something from the University of Michigan. Did I get that right?
Yeah, usually, but today I actually dressed up for you.
Oh, wow. I'm so honored. But I love seeing, last time I saw you a couple nights ago, you were in your Michigan sweatshirt.
Always,
so
always.
Great team spirit there and loyalty to University of Michigan. I love that. And what we're going to talk about today is internal family systems. I really want to promote this book, and we don't get anything from promoting this book. We just both love it, and it has been transformative in our lives and in our clients' lives as coaches. It is called No Bad Parts: Healing Trauma and Restoring Wholeness with Internal Family Systems. And so Erin and I had a lunch for hours and hours where they were kind enough and generous enough to tell me a lot about internal family systems, to recommend this book. And of course, because I'm such a voracious consumer and reader of this kind of material, personal growth material, I read it immediately and found it incredibly helpful and transformative. Let's start for beginners. Tell us a little bit about what internal family systems is.
Yeah. So let's just start with this idea that we are taught that we're just a single monolith or mono mind. But all of us at some point will say things like, a part of me wants ice cream, a part of me wants to be healthy, a part of me this, a part of me that. And what's really true, kind of like the movie Inside Out, if anyone's seen the Pixar movie, we've got hundreds of little parts, or hundreds, thousands of parts of ourselves. And those parts all kind of have their own little personalities. So, I've got an inner control freak and an inner perfectionist and an inner critic. And what you can look at is all these parts are playing a role in an inner system, almost like a family. So some of these parts are really close and working together. Some of them are fighting with each other like brother and sister. Some of them are parents taking care of child. And so once we can start getting to know who's inside, who's at the switchboard or driving the bus, however you want to call it, we can start to work with them, and we can start approaching our lives from a much more compassionate and calm and curious space. And we can learn to, self-leadership is what I call myself as a coach. We can learn to lead ourselves and our inner systems in a more harmonious way. And what I love about this model is so much of what we're doing in life is trying to grit through our growth. And we're doing a lot of, I don't know about you, Bridget, but I shamed myself into achievement for so many years. And all of my achievement was about overcoming what I perceived to be my flaws, my weaknesses, so I could feel good enough. And this model really taught me that no, shame is not the path. In fact, what if we befriend our shame and take a calm and compassionate and curious approach to it and understand what's inside trying to protect us? And once we can have that relationship with those little parts of us inside, they soften. And then we have the ability to go achieve from a more, I'm going to use the word joy, joyful space.
That is a beautiful description. I was wondering how you would, after, reading the entire book, how can we put it into simple terms that everybody can relate to? And you just did that beautifully. Everybody knows we all have these parts inside of us. And everybody has said that at some point. Why is there this part of me that feels like it's forcing me to do these things that I know aren't what I really want, or aren't in my highest good, or are out of a place of fear? I'm curious about the connection between inner child work, because we hear about that a lot. And I've talked with a lot of therapists who help people go back to that terrified 3-year-old or 5-year-old that lives inside of them, and kind of go back as an adult and heal and say, you're safe now. I know it's a different system, but can you kind of talk a little about that, those connections? Because I think people know about that as well, usually.
Yeah, they're very related. So first of all, we have lots and lots of parts of us. We have parts of us that get us out of bed, parts of us that make us eat, all that stuff. Not all of our parts are things that are in our way, but there are parts that are what we call burdened in the internal family systems model. They're carrying some sort of belief about the world that is creating lack of action, or creating actions that are not great for us. They're what they call firefighters that numb us out, or people who drink or binge or whatever. Oftentimes these burdens were created at a younger age. So we've always had these parts. And the idea that Dick talks about, right, in the book, or I don't know, Richard, I call him Dick, most people call him Dick, is we don't have bad parts. They're all intending to be good, but at some point in our life, they picked up a burden. They picked up a belief. And oftentimes it is a younger version of us. So these parts get frozen in time. So if I want to go back and work with, I can use one. I could not be held by friends. I've been through a really big set of personal transitions in the last year, and it was terrifying for my system to let my friends hold me through it. And that went back to some parts that came online early in childhood based on some interactions with my dad. And so I had to go back and ask that part, how old are you? How old do you think I am? And do some reparative, basically inner child work. So not everything goes back to an inner child interaction, but there are certain times in the IFS world where, yeah, you're going to get to know this part that's carrying a belief. And it is absolutely something that's needing a redo from childhood.
Exactly. Thank you for that very eloquent explanation. And one of the things that moves me so much is that we want to be kind to all the parts, and we want to listen to them. And I think so many of us are trying to shut them out, quiet the voices, and
yes,
thinking that bullying them out of the way or beating them away is the way to go. And it's actually the opposite. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. One of my favorite ways to think about it is it's like holding a kickboard underwater. I hope you can get the visual. I hope your listeners can get the visual of how difficult it is to hold a kickboard underwater, and how like there's effort and you're having to balance, and you have all your attention is actually on keeping that thing down rather than being in the pool and having fun, right? So that's what we're doing with our parts, is we're holding these kickboards effortfully underwater. Well, we all know what eventually happens. Eventually that kickboard slips out and pops us in the face.
Yes.
So rather than that, have the kickboard float at the surface. Let's get to know that part. Because while we're holding it down, our attention is on it. Tension's not having us move forward. And there's always a risk that something is going to happen, that thing comes out. And my version of kicking in the face is it comes out raging, your inner critic, and stops you from the thing you want to do. So the idea is, what if we welcome it? Like a kickboard floating at the surface with us. And what if we spend some time and get to know that part? Why are you here? What are you afraid of if you don't do this job you've been doing? Once you start getting in relationship and in connection with this part, all of a sudden these parts soften. And now the critic might be able to hang out by your side. And maybe we need our critic every so often. I like the critic because it usually tells me I'm stepping into something uncomfortable and new. So what if we build a relationship with this part and have it become an ally to us rather than something we need to really shut out and get rid of? Because we're not going to get rid of them. All that you do when you keep pushing them is that you're putting them into exile, but they're there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that alone can provide some comfort for folks listening, that look, you don't have to fight anybody on the inside. Erin, you told me the other day about an episode of Glennon and Abby's podcast, We Can Do Hard Things, which we're both fans of. And of course, I listened to it immediately with Martha Beck. So everybody, if you love this and you want to go in more depth and hear different perspectives on it, different applications, Martha Beck actually walks through with Amanda, who's one of the hosts of that podcast, some IFS work, some very deep IFS work of finding that inner part and hearing it and giving it an identity and a name even. And so look for Glennon and Abby and Amanda's podcast. It's called We Can Do Hard Things, and the episode with Martha Beck, if you want to look at how what Erin is describing is actually used in kind of a therapeutic model. And I know maybe you can speak to that a little bit too, Erin, because you are involved with trainings, with internal family systems trainings, and how that looks when you actually apply it to helping someone discover these parts and work with them.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways I can go with this. I will just say also what I love about the Martha Beck episode is her style is really playful. She's doing it in a coaching context, and there's definitely slight differences between how a coaching context works versus a therapeutic context. But it's so beautiful because you just bring an example of a dilemma you're experiencing, and okay, put one part in one hand and one part in another, and then let's get to the root of who are these different parts? Why are they in opposition? Why are they fighting? What do they want? And to some degree, you get down to this, they both want the same thing, but have different strategies. And so you get them to the negotiation table. What's beautiful is that there's all this inner world mapping you do. Who's in the system and what are they doing and how are they relating to each other? But then once you start having relationships with these parts, what happens is they start taking on new roles, and then you actually have a path forward for how you can move about your goals and move about your life with them by your side. And it's great to see the IFS model started in therapy, and I've seen it work in therapeutic contexts around pretty big issues, but now it's moving into, I've had colleagues who are in nursing and community, spiritual leaders, coaches, because everywhere we go, we bring our parts with us. And everywhere we go, we could really benefit from getting to know who's there and how are they affecting our personal and professional goals and relationships.
I love this. And part of what stands out to me most about what you just shared is the idea that we're often seeing these parts subconsciously or consciously as our enemies. And we can do some deep inner work where we turn them into our allies. We give them a new job. We ask them, what is your job? Why have you been feeling you have to do this job? And could we find another job for you?
And they take on, there's a little bit of, I'm a scientist by training, and some of this feels a little bit magical to me still. I have a very skeptical part. I've been told to continue welcoming that skeptical part as I dive deeper into the training. You ask inside this part, what job would you rather have? And they usually have an answer. And so then it just becomes, okay, what do they need in order to stop having to work so hard doing the thing they're doing and do this new job? I also really like this. Another metaphor that really resonates for me is the idea of a symphony. So we want all of our symphony players to play the correct instrument, first of all, play at the right volume and the right pitch and work in harmony with each other. And what we're doing is we're being the conductors. And we want to do is help each of those instrument players play their best version of the music in harmony with everyone else. The answer is not making an enemy. And it's not, you can't lose an instrument. You can't just have like the whole flute section drop out. There's going to be a missing part. Right.
So Erin, it seems as if most of us have a part that is terrified of getting anything wrong. And that's, well, for me, I can say, is often screaming at me, don't do this. Don't take this risk. Don't put that post out. Don't write a book. Don't do anything. Just curl up under the covers and hide, because we're not going to get it right. We're not going to do it perfect. Imposter syndrome. Somebody's going to find out that we don't really know what we're doing and we're talking about. Does everybody have that part, or does it just feel that? I mean, I feel that way about myself and all of my clients and all of my friends. What do you think?
There probably are some unicorns out there that don't have that part, but everybody I've ever talked to and worked with absolutely has that part. And I will say, it's going to be a little mind-blowing. We have multiple parts that want to get it right, and in different contexts. There might be a part that needs to get it right in terms of making big decisions. There's a part that needs to get it right in terms of what you say next. And what it ends up happening is we're so caught up in the get it right that we're paralyzed. And so I love working with parts like that, especially with a lot of the high achievers I work with, because there's so many different things that the get it right part is protecting from shame, from embarrassment, from literally making the wrong decision and having consequences that they can't undo. And so what we do is we slow down, we get to know that particular get it right part that's showing up. How long have you been doing this job? What are your memories of times Bridget got it wrong? What were the consequences? What would you need in order to relax just 1% and let Bridget try on an action or something along those lines to see if it's okay if she doesn't have to get it right?
I love that. I love the idea of 1% too, because I feel like sometimes when I'm able to do the thing that my part is telling me I'm not going to be good enough at, or people are going to laugh at me and make fun of me, it's just that 1% that somehow, and again, it comes from hearing that part and validating that part. Of course, this is scary. This is new, no guarantees. But let's try it. I hear you, and we're going to try it and learn from it and see what happens. It's kind of like they then become friends and they say, all right, we're going to take the leap together. I'm not going to shove you to the side and quiet you and take the leap, because that's just the painful way to do things, the excruciating way to do things.
And this is a great distinction between IFS's therapy versus coaching. So and this is my style, is I almost always try to create some sort of negotiation between the part and the person on what's the experiment that will not be so risky that it could completely reaffirm that part's strong beliefs, but that will just push the envelope a little bit. And so we design these experiments that the part is in agreement with. It's a consent-based model on every score. And then the client will come back to me after a week. Okay, did you and that get it right part try some experiments? What happened? What's the data? How's the get it right part feeling now? Are we willing to keep trying and doing more? Is it completely convinced?
Yes, you just reminded me of something I wanted to ask you before.
Yeah.
So you talk about self-leadership, and in the IFS literature, there's this idea of the self, the actual self. And so I'm still trying to understand that more. To me, it feels like there's this self. I don't know if it's one of the parts or it's as you said, the conductor of the parts, but the self, to me, it feels like the self is the whole healed me that is able to communicate with all these parts and help them to, as you said, as in a symphony, to play together towards some common goal. Can you tell us more about that self and self-leadership?
Yeah. So I have different words for it. I mean, I love the word self, but a lot of people have different words for it. You could call it your inner wisdom, your higher good. But the idea is that we all have this. We all have this indestructible piece of us. Could be soul, could be spirit. Like I said, inner wisdom. It's fully healed and it is a healing entity. And it is not a part, it is separate from the parts. And many of us many people have a hard time accessing it. So I will just say right off the bat, as I describe what self is, if you don't feel like you have access to it, that's okay. So many of us are walking around with layers and layers of parts protecting us. But the idea is that this self is deeply calm, compassionate, connected, curious, creative, courageous, confident. There's 8 C's. I probably missed one, but there's these 8 C's, and it's a really embodied feeling. And so all of the work in IFS is coming from this place of, can that our self, our highest good, our inner wisdom, be in relationship with our parts and guide and heal those parts?
That's so healing just to hear. And I think that a lot of us have gotten in touch with that self. We've had moments of clarity and all the 8 C's. And if you want to know all of the 8 C's, go buy the book.
Clarity is the one I missed. Actually, now that you said
There we
clarity,
go.
I'm
Okay,
like,
so
I
we
usually
got
have
it.
them in pairs of 2 in my head, but I messed up the order today, and I went, oh no.
So calm, compassionate, connected, curious, creative, courageous, confident, clear. The self has all of this. It's all living within the self. And some of us thankfully have had moments, whether it be through meditation or maybe plant medicine or some other means, spiritual experiences where we've felt that we're really in that self entirely. And the parts are integrated in that moment. And it's just complete love. And there's no mean voice.
Yeah,
saying
and
any of the things.
I should mention that the goal is not to become a Zen monk and be in self all the time. This is why I love this symphony metaphor. The conductor can't make music. The conductor is just leading the symphony. You still need your parts.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's about, that's why self-leadership is not about being in self all the time. It's not about getting rid of parts. It's about being in concert, in harmony with all your parts from a place of self being sort of the foundation.
Exactly. So can we transition a little bit to talk about how all this relates to the idea of, you and I are both business owners, we're coaches, and we have lots of things we're doing in the world. And you're telling us that we want to be joyful AF as we're doing all of the things that we're doing in the world. So to me, there's a perfectly natural connection to all of the internal family systems work. Tell us a little more about your book and you.
Yeah. So let me just talk about how I think about joy, because the word is an abstract word that everyone fills in their own meaning on. And a lot of people, when I say joy, they go immediately to fun and delight. And yes, but as I was trying to figure out what is joy and looking at scientific literature and how other people talk about it, I found this really intriguing thing, which is there are 4 different C words that come up a lot, and those are 4 of the 8 C's of self. So I think of the salt, fat, acid, and heat of joy as connection, curiosity, creativity, and courage. You could make an argument for the others too. But so when we are joyful, we are tapped into those 4 C's, which means we're also tapped into ourselves and leading ourselves from that place. So I secretly wrote an IFS book. Didn't mean to. But imagine when you come from that place of, I'm deeply connected to myself, my parts, who I am, what I care about, my values, my purpose, deeply connected to others, whether it's the people you serve or the people you work with, and then deeply connected to the collective, whatever that is. That's joy. And then if you can also be in a space of being really curious and experimental in your work and innovative and creative, that's joyful. And the courage piece, people get a little confused, but if we set out to achieve anything in our life or business and we get it easily, we're not actually satisfied. We actually need obstacles, challenge. We need to be stretching ourselves. So joy is not in doing the things that are going to guarantee the easy path. Joy is taking the courageous path. So what I'm here to help a lot of business owners recognize is that joy can't just be the afterthought of business. And a lot of people, we start our businesses for joy, and that's the first thing that goes out the window when we get caught up in traditional metrics of success, or this is the business strategy that we have to do because someone told us we have to do it. So I'm all about, how do we look at all the ways that joy is leaking from you because you're not coming from a place of connection, curiosity, creativity, and courage? And how do we get you on that more aligned path so that not only are you operating as a symphony, but your business is too?
I think everyone inherently wants that, but we lose sight of it and we get pulled into, as you've talked about in your book and you shared, you worked for some of the biggest companies and was senior level positions. And so you know what it feels like to get pulled into that hustle and grind culture and the next promotion and the next raise and compensation and your measurables and your metrics and you're being so competitive. How do we come back to this place that you're describing and remind ourselves that this is what really matters?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to take a hard look at, I love to call it the joy audit. What I do with people is have them take a piece of paper and put a line down it, and then just throughout their week, look at people, meetings, activities, thoughts, whatever's draining their joy, and then whatever's contributing to their joy. And just right then, it's, whoa, what an insightful exercise. And then we look at, okay, which of these drains are things you can just get rid of? Do you actually have to be doing these things? Or are you telling yourself a story that you have to do these things? And then of the things you can't get rid of that, yeah, you really have to be doing them. How do you make them more joyful? For instance, I have to pay my taxes. I'm constantly asking myself, what's the most joyful way to do that? So that's a great start, is to look at, before you can even figure out what is joyful, look at what's draining you. Then look at what's being joyful and start looking at how the joyful things have actually been connected to your success. Because what often happens when I'm talking to people is, and I'm guilty of this too, is I created so much success by being miserable that I created a really strong belief. In order to create success, I have to be miserable. And if I follow the joyful path, all hell's going to break loose. All my success is going to go out the window. And so what I did was slowly question those beliefs. And I don't ask people when I'm working with them to go from the miserabling it to the joyful in a 180-degree turn. It's, how do we 1% it? Let's infuse 1% more joy. Let's see what happens. So go back and see all the activities that are joyful, see how they're connected to your success. And then one by one, continue adding more of those and seeing how they contribute to your success, and question all of the shoulds, the supposed tos, the have tos, and say, can I actually ask, what do I want? And it takes a while because we're layered with shoulds and supposed tos and have tos. And one of the things I think is so profound about internal family systems as a model is we talk about our individual beliefs that happen from childhood or events in our lives, but we also talk about the generational stuff that we inherit. And we also talk about the cultural stuff. And we are steeped in a, capitalist, patriarchal, white supremacy culture. And there are ways that we take on beliefs that are just embedded. And so I'm not saying that we have to, again, rage against all of those all the time, but let's challenge those. Can we see that, oh, that should is from a cultural message, not it's not real. And
Right.
how can we then experiment and test the want?
Right. Ooh, that's a great exercise for everybody. Do your joy audit and be honest with yourself about how many things are you doing out of that obligation, that pressure, and it's draining, and how much time are you actually spending intentionally doing things that bring you joy, and do that audit, be honest with yourself, see what's really going on there. And you got into some other things that I want to use as a segue, because I think part of what we're talking about is being your true self, being honest with yourself and others about who you are and what brings you joy, as well as just who you authentically are. I always find it fascinating as a coach how such different things bring people joy. One person's joy might be my thing that I want to avoid at all costs. Skydiving or pickleball, whatever it is. Yoga, for me, I love yoga. And sometimes I'll mention that and people are like, no, can't stand it. And we have to really honor that and look at that and take a hard look, as you said. And so I'm going to use that to segue, if it's okay with you, Erin, to talk a little, just briefly, just to introduce people to what we talked about on my other podcast.
Yes.
which I got to tell everybody, I should have said this at the beginning, but hopefully everybody stayed with us. Erin, this is Erin's second time being a podcast guest for me, which I'm so grateful for. And Erin was a guest on my podcast with my daughter called Transgender School, where we explore and educate people about diverse transgender identities. And sometimes being non-binary is considered under the umbrella of transgender. Each person gets to choose whether or not they identify as transgender. But Erin really, really helped us to be able to talk about the process of this awareness of self and coming into realizing our identities and how much joy that can bring us. We talk about in that world, this is a different world than what we usually talk about, but trans joy and gender euphoria, when people can fully live and be their true gender identity in the world and in their expression, whatever unique expression that may be. And so, Erin, you are very inspirational to me in that area. And
thank you.
And my daughter Jackie, who is transgender, and as I said, go check out Transgender School podcast. We talk about all things related to LGBTQ identities and rights and understanding the many diverse experiences in that world. But can you tell us a little bit about how that fits in, how your identity and coming out as your true self and discovering that over the often many years that it takes people to come to those kinds of discoveries? Tell us about this, please.
Yeah, well, I will say those of us who don't fit into the gender that we were assigned at birth, or even the binary, we naturally kind of understand this parts thing. Even just all of us, when we go get into parts work, everybody I've ever worked with, they have male parts, female parts, non-gendered parts. So that's been a really interesting journey for me. Of this is sort of the natural way I've always seen the world. And it's so interesting for me, getting to know all of my parts from this gentle, compassionate place is making me even more affirmed in my identity and who I am. And as you were talking, Bridget, what really struck me is, yes, we have trans joy. I want that for everybody on this planet, that we don't have to reserve it for a marginalized identity. We can all dive into our parts and create a relationship with our most authentic version of ourselves. And the more we do that, and the more we unburden those traumatized parts, the more joy we're going to be feeling, and the more me each of us will feel. I believe so dearly in, it's a kind of cliche phrase, but like this idea of know, like, and trust, that we want people to know, like, and trust us as coaches in business. When we do this work, we get to know, like, and trust ourselves.
Yes.
And that is the most authentic and joyful place to be.
Yes. Yes. Well, I so appreciate you universalizing it, because of course I agree with you, and I find the work incredibly helpful in my life. And I do, though, want to say that it was really fascinating to hear you share with Jackie in your very eloquent, brief way what we're talking about here about parts. And she could so relate to that voice and that part, who always knew that she was a woman, even though she was assigned male at birth. And it took until she was 19 for her to really finally hear that voice. And I remember her saying that a therapist described it as the volume keeps getting turned up on something. And that's the voice. That's no, we're a woman in here for the most part. Of course, all these different parts, but so it can be particularly helpful as people are really coming to terms with and discovering and trying to, we shouldn't have to, but we're expected to find labels to explain to others, this is who I am. So it can be really helpful in that process in any aspect of one's identity.
Well, and I see it. Self is not necessarily who you are at the core, right? It's your harmonious set of parts with yourself, but self's usually the one with that voice that's turning up. And what's often happening is having to peel back the layers of protection and get those protectors to step literally aside, so you can open the veil to that authenticity that lies within you and understand who's there. Because for a lot of us who are marginalized, those protections started very early and it got very strong. We all have that. And a lot of our authenticity is being protected based on those individual things that happened to us, based on the generational stuff we inherited, and based on the cultural stuff.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful process to unpack those layers and get to what is the core you. And then to see how that shifts how you show up in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful description. Those protectors that are trying to get us to conform, they are doing an important job. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, sometimes
Yeah,
that is required for our survival, to
absolutely.
let that
And
part have its way.
yeah. And for some people it's still their survival. And so
Hmm. Hmm.
we never ask a
Right.
part to change its ways unless it's
Right.
absolutely safe to do so.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, we have covered so much ground. I'm so happy that I had
Yes.
no notes, everybody, because with Erin, I don't need to. I just
It's
knew
so
that
sweet.
they would say things that would then spark other questions that I would ask, and we could just talk for hours, as you can tell. But Erin, I do want to check in with you. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you feel we left out, or anything you'd like to add or build on that we want to leave people with? And I'll just summarize. We've talked about the internal family systems model. Best book on that is called No Bad Parts, and Erin's book, Joyful AF. You got to get both books immediately. The essential business strategy we're afraid to put first. And we've covered a brief introduction to internal family systems, how it's used, how you can use it in your own life to do important healing work, and to be able to go after your goals from a place of your authentic self. And we talked a little bit about gender identity. I really want to encourage you. I will put in the show notes the link to the Transgender School podcast, which you can find on any podcast app and on YouTube on our Transgender School page. It's just at Transgender School over on YouTube. And we talk much more in depth about how all of this relates to gender identity and LGBTQ plus identities. And we really want you to check that out to go deeper. So Erin, any final thoughts?
Yes, I've got two of them. One is Joyful AF. I wrote it as a business book because if you speak to everybody, you speak to no one. But I have been told
Mm,
over and over again, I wrote a book on joy. So if you're not a business owner out there and you don't think this is relevant, check it out because it actually is. So that's one thing. The other thing
agreed.
is,
Completely agreed. It's relevant, as I'm reading it, to every
yeah,
single aspect of my life. And if I weren't a business owner, it would be just as valuable.
yes. So that's one thing. The other is, I just want to leave with this curious contemplation for people is what would it be like to approach every part of yourself from a place of curious compassion? Just what would that be like?
Great question. And I just felt my whole body go, oh, that would be nice. That would
Mm-hmm.
be so nice. That would be so good. I hope
Mm-hmm.
everybody felt that as well. And I hope we'll all do that for ourselves as much
Mm-hmm.
as we can. And as we learn about the different parts that are
Mm-hmm.
living here with us, inside of us, and how we can all find more harmony together to live our
Mm-hmm.
authentic lives. Thank you, Erin. And I
You're
just
welcome.
want to thank you. Let everybody know you can find Dr. Baker out there on all the social media places where you are, Instagram, and anything else you want to share about where people can find you.
Yeah, my website, I'm sure you'll have in the show notes,
Yes.
erinmbaker.com. And one of my things is it's not super joyful for me to do business stuff on LinkedIn. So I do some stuff. I've also changed my Instagram to be more personal, but I really, really joyfully love connection with people. So if you have the courage, reach out and DM me. I'm always happy to chat with people.
That's a wonderful offer. I love that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Erin. And I hope that you've learned something from today. I've learned a lot. No matter how much we talk about all of this, I always learn so many new pieces of information that are helpful to me. So I hope you found it valuable, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye.